Women are grossly underrepresented in leadership and in the policy-making processes at all levels, which in turn impedes their rights, limits their access to resources and opportunities, making it difficult to effect real change. In spite of all the international treaties Nigeria is a signatory to, and the policies and laws in place to protect the rights and inclusion of women in Nigeria, a significant implementation gap exists. The implementation of policies will only be prioritized if those affected by such policies are also represented in its design. This is where inclusive leadership becomes crucial. If Nigeria is to have more inclusive policies, it must embrace gender-inclusive leadership, where women are leading alongside their male counterparts. Welcome to the Leading Women Show Policy Series, brought to you by the National Endowment for Democracy and Luminate. My name is Abosede Jojagan, and today we will discuss gender-inclusive leadership equals inclusive policy. Our guests for today are Adora Onyechere Sydney Jack, a gender inclusion advocate with over 15 years experience in journalism, public policy, and strategic communications. She's the founder of We Enable Women Everywhere Network Afrique, a Pan-African organization that promotes women's visibility. Our next guest is Dr. Ene Obi, an activist and former country director of ActionAid Nigeria. She is the chair of the advisory committee of the Nigeria Endowment Through Asset Transformation Initiative. Our final guest is Jemima Jatto, a tri-sector specialist who works at the intersection of policy, programs, gender equality, and social inclusion. She supports global and national organizations in developing inclusive policies and practices. I cannot wait for us to get into today's conversation. So welcome again, and thank you so much for being here, all three of you. Today we're talking about a topic that is dear to all our hearts. We're talking about how gender-inclusive leadership equals inclusive policies. Dr. Ene, I want to start with you. And please feel free to take this question anywhere. Is Nigeria a gender-inclusive country?
If you look at the gender balance in terms of what we have on record in Nigeria right now, we started from the parliament itself. When you look at the National Assembly, you have the Senate, for example, that has 108 and 9, and you have only 4 women. And then you have the House of Representatives, you have 360 seats, persons, and you have about 16, 11, 15. At one point, somebody lost the case, and so the figures just keep changing, and so 360. And then you go to the Houses of Assembly. We have about 14 Houses of Assembly that there are no women at all. In some of the Houses of Assembly, maybe about 6 of them, you have only a single woman. This is a country that, in terms of public health, maternal health and child health, you have maternal mortality as we are among the 5 last in the world, as if we're at war. Even the war-torn countries are not as bad as Nigeria. And so who is deciding about women? The connection with that and decision-making is that the quality of any decision depends on who is in the boardroom to take that decision. In appointing position, we have been getting lip service. The governments, from one government to the other, they have never meant well. I think we need to build a women agency. We need voices for women. So I want to commend you on your efforts so far and what you are doing. And this is one of the things we should be doing for women.
Fantastic.
Building the agency.
Thank you. Adora, let me come to you and ask you that same question. Is Nigeria a gender-inclusive country?
To answer your question directly,
No.
Nigeria is not inclusive.
Fantastic. Well, Jemima.
The bigger space of Nigeria, it is still not inclusive. By the time I got into Kaduna State government, I was in my 20s. And I was not the youngest. I had people in their early 20s who were already special assistants to the governor. And you have opportunities to not just talk to the governor and the deputy governor, but the commissioners, to work with them. But I'm not unaware that there are many spaces that I could not enter. After I leave the bubble of Kaduna State, I could not step into those other spaces. When I come to the national meeting, so the governor would have, the Nigerian Governors Forum meeting, and he will carry me in tow because I was special assistant intergovernmental relations. And as soon as you step in the door, you know that you're not welcome. You know, you can barely see any woman there, even if you're only there taking notes and reminding him and briefing him about something that happened when he stepped out. You just know you are kept at one very back, dingy, tiny seat. You know that you are not part of this team, you know. And so for that reason, the bigger space of Nigeria, it is still not inclusive.
Yeah.
We still have a long way to go.
Fantastic. That's a great place to take a quick break, and we'll continue the conversation when we get back. Welcome back. So, Dr. Ene, we've spoken a lot about the challenges for non-inclusion of women, but I want us to start to talk about solutions. And the first thing I would like us to think about is, as the one who might have the most history here, have there been policies that you have seen in Nigeria that have facilitated inclusion?
No, one of the policies that we thought could create some magic is the National Gender Policy, which came on board until it was revised. Even revised, they put it at 40% instead of the Beijing, the 35% affirmative action. They took it at 40, but what does the government do? So the political leadership is important for them to mean it. Because if you are talking about elected positions and you don't have you may not be able to bring in as many women, what happens to appointees? You have a committee of 30, you take 1, 2, 3 women, they're already disempowered. Because in the process, you have to have some caucus, decide, try to convince a lot of people to be able to behave like you. There has been some deliberate policies. I think just like he said, El-Rufai made one. You have the current governor of Kwara State.
Yes.
I think it's about 40 or 45% in terms of parity.
His cabinet is 50.
The cabinet, somebody is, means something and does something. Who is a woman in the first place? We need to be able to ask. Yes, we are talking of decisions, but a woman is not good enough to be your leader. But you don't do without your mother. Your mother was able to give you life. How many of you in the family, that woman will do nothing but to take care and make sure that her children are able, even when she's not educated, she will sell all her wrappers to ensure that her children are able to go to school. And so decision making, what is your respect for even the woman that is at home that we're talking about? Inclusion, men prefer their daughters, in fact, is their gold, is their princess. But what of the princess in the house? As a wife, as a woman who gave birth to all of those children, you want to look at the future of other girls who are your daughters, but you're not looking at the women who are circulating now. These are, women's rights are human rights.
Yes.
Because when you hit a woman who has 5 children, for example, you are hitting all the humanity, the humans that she's controlling. And that's why we say women's rights are human rights. I've interacted with so many, so many of our friends, development leaders who said, I am here because of my mom. My father walked out of our lives. You have some fantastic fathers. You have some terrible fathers. They walked out of our lives and we're here today. And so when you are coming to the solution itself, when you are in the classroom from pre-nursery to nursery school, to primary school, to secondary and to the universities, you sit down with girls. We compete. There's no separate question for girls. There's no separate question. And, you have the girls, many of them having first class. And what becomes of them when they move from that level? Yes, they become housewives. They go into the reproduction, which is a great duty for humanity. Because if you don't replace people who will sit here in another how many years, me and you, we are not sitting here. We have to replace. That's a duty that women will do. And so how do we do that? We looked at the gender bills, which was 2 years ago. You know, the gender bills was a conscious effort to say, you need to introduce bills to deliberately include a number of women to come into the section. Like, you can have a Senate of 109 and you have only 4. There's so many committees, women are not represented. And these people, and it's also an economic power, because you can do a lot of things for your constituency. And so these are some of the things that we're talking about. The lockdown of the National Assembly 2 years ago happened because they threw out all the bills. It's like, who is going to decide? It was going well until there were meetings at night that says, why would you do this? We have a lot of men that oppress women. And for them, women are not supposed to be part of decision making. And so it's injurious to them. But it's not injurious when that woman was raising you at home. If she is able to take decisions that can protect your life, can save your life to who you are today, she's not good enough. And so you have deliberate environment. We need to look at the women agency. The work we need to do is political education. We need to educate the people. We need a women agency. As women, what are we doing for other women? What are you doing for the women? If you are not bold enough to come out, the women that come out, can we vote for them? Can we boldly vote for them? If that's what you choose to do. And we're just coming back from Ondo election. And I'm talking to myself. I said, they can't even see a woman to be a deputy. Why are women going out to vote? We don't need to go out to vote. Let's say if you don't see women on the ticket, why are you going there? So it's a new conversation that is going to come up.
Wow. Watch out. All right. Jemima, what steps do you think can be taken to advance inclusive leadership? Because as you described, you know the value of what that can do for inclusive policies.
What I would say the first step should be is really just tying in to what Ene shared. We have to get it in writing. So many brilliant, and I liked how she traced the history to how practices sometimes influence policies. Practices, I think, are really great. But most times practices are tied to an individual. For instance, a benevolent tyrant, as some people would say, better to have a benevolent tyrant than someone who is not benevolent at all. But the way I see it is, while practices are good, we need to be able to put them in annals of history by getting them into our constitution first. Because what that means is that it provides sustainability, it ensures that it can be scaled up, and it ensures that more people who were who were not alive at the time when the practices were done can come and open these books and say, because it is stated in our constitution or in this act and that act, then I can pick it up. It gives you legal backing, so to speak, to start to push for certain strong opinions about inclusion. But that does not mean that practices are not important. But we need to see a huge burst of multiple people from multiple angles doing the same thing at the same time. That's the only way that I see that we can make this big waterfall, of impact around practices. And then the third thing I wanted to add as well is that we should support those people who are doing these things, people who are change makers, those who we call outliers. Earlier, Ene mentioned, the Ransom Kutis and Margaret Echo and many people, supporting them so that they don't feel like they are alone in this space. So whether it's a woman running for the first time for an electoral position, or it's a mother trying to push an advocacy for protection of children's rights, wherever we find these outliers, which unfortunately they're outliers in this instance, because despite the decades of work we've been doing on inclusion, women and even male allies who stand up for inclusion, who embody it, are still seen as outliers.
Exactly.
So supporting them as well with everything we have, whether it's our vote, whether it's our voice, is something that I think is very, very crucial. And then I want to add with what I'll call like economic empowerment. A lot of the things that we do in this country and the world all over is tied to access to capital or access to finance.
Yeah.
And I think there's this development economist that I really, really liked, described what development meant to him at the time was you have to check poverty, you have to check inequality, and you have to check unemployment. When you solve those three, it kind of sets you on a trajectory for achieving so many other things, especially more, sustainable and climate-friendly things as we're looking at today. And so what I would say is providing access to women for financial empowerment, whether it's financial inclusion, whether it's entrepreneurship, those who are already in that space, ensure that you provide them with capital and training and all of that. Because when women have the wealth, they can then plow back into themselves, into their children, into other women and support whether it's their political ambitions or their leadership goals and all of that. Because if women have the voice but don't have the money to back it up, we're not going somewhere. We're not going anywhere at all. So ensuring that women have money, they have the ability to make more wealth, and are able to. And as we know, women are more transparent, they are more accountable, they are more equitable. And so when we get more women prosperous as a country, the country becomes more prosperous, and then more women can get to leadership positions, and they can then go back and influence those inclusive policies that we need to be able to drive this country forward.
Fantastic. Adora, I want to come to you. When I think about lawmakers, I feel like you've had a lot of close engagement with them. How can we build, since it's men that are there, for now, for the next 3 years, Abi, Dr. Ene, these 10th assemblies, men that are there, how can we build the capacity of these lawmakers to prioritize and recognize the importance of gender inclusion, whether it's in leadership or across all levels?
Right, thank you so much for that question. And I think I'll first of all start from amplifying voices. I think it's very key. Because I can tell you that, first of all, listening to, I like to call her Mommy Ene, because she's a generational stewardship. And I like to say that when she mentioned the 5 gender bills, and the march to the National Assembly, I can tell you that the day that they threw out the 5 gender bills from the National Assembly, I was in shock.
March 1st, 2022.
I was in shock. Why? Because we had lobbied. They said we didn't lobby. We had made phone calls. We had had conversations. And we had the first ladies at the time and the vice president's wife lead the charge. And we went to the National Assembly and we sat down there. And
they all said yes. We
were told, don't worry, we've got the signatures, it's all done and dusted. You would have your 5 gender bills. And we sat down there just waiting to be told, and a handshake across the table. And they all stepped it down, just for a very few of them. And they didn't care that women were in the plenary, seated in that room, mothers, aunties, custodians. They didn't care that their sisters or the future of their daughters that relied on those 5 gender bills were in that room. They stepped down the 5 gender bills, and to me, it meant them saying yes to sexual and gender-based violence, yes to the exclusion of women in the National Assembly, yes to insecurity and women as the burden bearers, yes to out-of-school children and girls out of school. It meant a yes to all the tragic indices leveled against women and girls in Nigeria. It didn't just mean a stepping down of documents for me. I had goosebumps for days, because for me, I started to analyze fatherhood. I started to analyze masculinity. What is patriarchy? It was bizarre for me to sit in that room and have those 5 gender bills stepped down, not just as a female, but because I'm thinking about the posterity of the next generation of girls at Bosede. It was emotional for me. It meant that men were okay with girls being raped. So it wasn't just a 5 gender bill. It was a say to women that you do not matter, that Nigerian girls can go and die. that our girl children do not mean anything in the circle of affairs of the development of this. It's not about, I don't even know if they understood the meaning of stepping down those bills. And when you asked them after the fact, they told us we did not lobby enough. So we did not lobby for you to say, yes, stop raping girls. We did not lobby for you to say, yes, have more girls in classrooms. We did not lobby for you to say, yes, my girl has gone to school, she has capacity to lead. I would allow her to go for elections and be voted for just as much as she can vote. That was what happened to me the day the 5 gender bills were stepped down. So it wasn't just a conversation of, oh, we've stepped it down. Because for them, it was a political conversation, an adventure for women to just want to mean something in the status quo of the development of political space in Nigeria. So to even start from there. So I'm thinking there needs to be a mental shift, a mind reset, that men really understand that if we are saying that you are first a partner in progress, you must understand what progress means. Progress means collaboration. It means partnership. We are not saying we want to be men. We are saying that we want to come into the space and work with you to make the social space conducive for our children, for our girl children, to make sure that our life counts too. That is what I think that we are trying to say. So a mental shift through orientation. And it has to start from the community. It has to go back home. Because Abosede, I understand the conversations and I applaud all the voices of women shaping the narratives in the media. Yourself, Cynthia Mbamalu, Choma Agwebo, Dorothy Njimanzi, the likes of Auntie Nobi, Ebere Ifendu, the young ones who are coming forward that are moving this movement to mean something more. But we also have to take it and dust it up and go back home and merge the conversation. Because I can tell you that we can do all the amplification that we do here, but if we do not carry them along, shape this conversation in a way that they understand, build mentorship clinics at that level, we will still have a 360 degrees approach, having to just try to change their mind and build them out of the circle of stigma and stereotype. So mind shift, and that will happen through orientation, awareness creation, campaigns. We must begin to go into the room carrying men along. Yes, we have the women's movement, but this movement is for the men to understand. So if the men must understand, they must also be at our table, just as we want them to allow us, quote unquote, to be on their table. So we have to hold hands across tables. They may not also understand it, and not all of them will agree, but those who agree become champions. And we begin to amplify the champions who are the male voices for the women. Yeah. And I think that's what we need to do. We need to have more women shows having more men on it, talking about issues about women and seeing how they see it, understand it, and interpret it. Because that's where the mindset shift will come. And then, in a nutshell, I would also say that the women in the room who are in governance, who are the leaders, should also hold hands across the table with other women. Because if you do not hold hands with other women across the table, that will mean that you will stop and finish and no one will take over. And so the baton is not exchanged. And that sort of is my experience with working with a lot of the legislators. Because, you know, the conversation that the space is conscripted because, oh, I fought for it, I came in here, you cannot just come and emerge, you cannot just come in and become, you know what I suffered, you have to carry bag, you have to do this, you have to paint shoe, you don't have to do, maybe that's not my capacity. My capacity could be writing reports for you. My capacity could be advisory. My capacity could be trying to look at talents within your space that can amplify your work. So I believe that women in the space should see us as collaborators, especially younger women, so that we can hold hands and begin to amplify more what they do, because you cannot practice what you preach.
Fantastic. Whoo! Adora made us cry. All right, okay. It's time for us to take another break. When we return, we will take some audience questions.
Hi, my name is Kalimat. It has been an emotional conversation, and I have a question. How do we ensure that women running for offices are being treated fairly and supported as their male counterparts?
I feel like that's $1 million question. Dr. Ene, do you want to respond to that?
Okay, for women, because of the patriarchal nature of the society, there have even been cases where women want to run for an office and they are not allowed to collect the form. You know, initially it was like, okay, women have free forms. You know, the seat they normally give us is a chairpersons or political parties or women wing or women leaders and so on and so forth. And that's why I think this argument about why do you go in there if you are not wanted? You know, if we are in a political, if we are members of political parties. And by the way, political parties in Nigeria don't even have registers. So we don't know who is their member in the first place. But in the last election, 2023 general election, a lady who wanted to collect a form for Senate, she had her money, but they blocked her from going into the room where she will collect the forms. And so what we are up against is bigger. There's like some criminal gang already that have ganged up and they want the positions, they want it by force. You see, the reason why they are not allowing women to go into politics because of transparency and accountability. Many of these political class, they're looters, they are criminals. It's not all of them, but some of them are. Because what you are having is people going to their governors. We have so many governors who have looted the treasury dry, in most cases from their state, for 8 years. And then they get the seat with the kind of unaccountable elections, you know, lack of transparency in our electoral environment that brings them on board. And so when you look at that, you are telling yourself, okay, so it's not just because the women don't have enough money to be able to collect the positions. But there are times in the political environment of Nigeria. Chief Mrs. Oshomo in 1998 won the ticket for AD in Osun State. She contested and won the ticket, the primaries. But the political class, the committee then came to Lagos, and I remember it very well. This was 31st of December, 1998, where there was a meeting in Lagos where we had to move women with Molue because I had just finished some educational process, you know, on women's political empowerment in the Makoko, Amukoko, you know, Mushin and all of those things. So we were politically, you know, women were quite enlightened about what it was. And for them, in Yoruba, they say, Omolomonje and Yomaloru Komeji. That is a child is a child. It doesn't have two names. She won that, and they denied her. We need to unite, because if you are a woman, there are no jobs for our children. There is bad governance in the country, and we cannot be part of the decision making. We need to unite ourselves together and make sure that we do something.
We have one more. Okay. Yes. Please go ahead.
It's been an amazing section so far. I'd like to ask, how can we consciously do the work of fighting the idea that women cannot be more or lead in the society?
I would say that it starts with education. And I think picking back off what Ms. Ene said, you know, was not just mobilizing women, but it was also educating, not just women and men, girls and boys. And I saw a tweet some time ago that mentioned that even a simple, I won't call it simple, but even everyday matters like menstruation. When you have those discussions, you don't take women to one room and have the conversation while the men are or the boys are completely oblivious of that, of what is happening. Yeah. There are conversations that must be had with everyone in the room, male, female, boy, girl, woman, man. And so it starts with that kind of education. So there's no secrecy about it. There's nothing that women know that men don't know. Or there's something men know that women don't know. And that's why women are clamoring or aspiring for this. No, it is a human right. Women's rights are human rights, all right, as we said earlier. That kind of conversation, education, advocacy must be had in conjunction between women and men. It starts from that training, and then it goes forward with now walking the walk, as we say, or walking the talk. When you train, when you advocate, when you educate people about why these rights matter, why these efforts matter, you then need to take a step forward and ensure that whether as a person of authority, whether in leadership or a governor or a president or people in the National Assembly and state assemblies, you then need to take the effort to ensure that beyond tokenism, beyond women leader, beyond one single woman who is a commissioner in a cabinet who can barely have her voice heard, you ensure that, you know how in employment, there are headhunters, right? They go out and they find the talent and then they pull you in. That's how we have to have these kinds of conversations. After we've had the conversations, we then ensure that we find the qualified women and we pump them with the knowledge, the capacity, the information, the access, the skills, and every single thing they need. Because these women are not just there for themselves, they are now looked onto as role models. And with every single thing, the more you view an image, the more you imbibe some parts of it into yourself. And so when we create an opportunity where girls can see women, a lot more women, not just one woman or 10 women, no. They can see 50% representation of women in our communications. By the way, I saw, we have a new orientation video, national orientation video, something like that. And it was beautiful, it was colorful. I saw it on TV a few days ago. But you know that final montage, the final thing that sticks to your mind, I saw 3 men dressed in Hausa, Igbo, Yoruba costume, which was good in terms of Nigeria's diversity. No. But not when you think of gender, not when you think of sex. And sex for us in Nigeria is the male-female is the biggest diversity factor in Nigeria. So we need to ensure that even in our communications, we are showing that there's woman, there is man. We are demonstrating it. We are showing it in our communications, and even what we say, changing even our language. You know, we can't be saying things like gentleman agreements. You know, it already turns a bias against women when we say things like that. So in our orientation as a country, we have to do it collectively, female, male. And then we have to find the capable women and support them. I always say this word, protect the women who are in those spaces. Because women are getting it really hard. What year was it that a woman leader was killed in Kogi, burnt alive, right? Exactly. So we will protect them, women and men. We will protect those people who are those outliers and then ensure that when they arise as role models, more girls can see them and aspire to them. And once that messaging goes around, you cannot see a 5-year-old girl who says she wants to be an engineer and then you be like, are you sure? Maybe you should try and be a nurse instead. You can't even be having that kind of conversation at that point anymore, because every girl knows she's as empowered as the boy. Fantastic. And every boy knows he's as empowered as the girl.
Fantastic. Now we will see what some Nigerians out there have to say before we hear final thoughts from our guests.
Education, I would continue that. Then I'm not a feminist per se, but I would create a platform where women are recognized, women in power, women in tech are like worldly recognized and appreciated.
Mo máa jẹ́ kó oúnjẹ pọ̀ gan o, oúnjẹ wà torí ebi ń pa Nàìjíríà gan, everybody ń kọ́ra gidigidi gan gidi ni, kò sóúnjẹ, kò síná, kò sómi, gbogbo yẹn gangan mo máa kọ́kọ́ face.
No.
I'll be very honest. No, I would say no, because there has not been gender equality when it comes to women in leadership, and this thing has to be a thing of gender equality.
I think the world is like getting better. We're not like still in the age where they say women can be in power. Because I was saying I'm currently in IEEE, so I'm a woman in power in tech at the moment. So to an extent, yes, but like it's Nigeria, the government is I won't say much, but like to an extent, I think.
Yes, I do. I think it benefits women. Yes, I have, like based on a departmental level in school. Yes, I have.
So many important points have been highlighted in this episode. Now, to bring our conversation to a close, I would love to hear your final thoughts. We've been talking about gender inclusive leadership equals inclusive policies. Adora.
A lot of us in this room are on social media, and we're engaging. And that means that what we say can either be negative or be positive. But most importantly, how does it project the woman or the girl child? And gender identity is so important in our language. And why I say this is that strategic communication for development is what policy framework is about. And in itself, we need to be careful what we respond to online and how we interpret what we see online. Because the moment you click on something, whether you read it, respond or not, the algorithm registers it. And for the fact that, you know, it has taken you as a data, the next time it reports it, you see a polling or something that says 300 young women responded, you know, to this video, and it continues to register. So I'm saying that we can all be inclusive ambassadors and impact makers with what we say and how we share our narratives. And I think that we need to begin to do that fight, like he asked earlier on, online, to begin to redirect conversations to mean that girls can, girls should, girls will, and girls will always do. And I think that's what I'll say.
Jemima, what would be your final thoughts?
I want to quickly add that I've had the opportunity to work in a highly male-dominated sector. And doing the work of gender equality within that kind of space puts you sometimes at very uncomfortable positions because you are engaging with deep-seated biases that has spanned not just beyond individuals, but beyond a system that has continued to keep it and, you know, embody it in a way that it's so difficult for a woman to come in. And when she comes in, it's very difficult for her to even thrive. And sometimes even when women want to thrive, they are so terrified of any kind of backlash that could come to them because of that. And so something that has always worked, right, is communicating it in such a way that it does not take away the value of what you're saying about gender equality. But sometimes it's good to make it digestible to the people you are dealing with. Not because you want to pander to them, but because you need to ensure that that message is heard and is accepted and then is now acted on. That's the first thing that I've always found that worked. The second thing I wanted to say, and to end this, is when we're talking about inclusive policies, we've talked about participation, inclusion in even how you design the policies. A lot of the time, something that we have missed, or sometimes it's just taken up by so many things going on at the same time, is that we've forgotten how to track. Because when we design policies that are not already created in a way that has metrics and indices and KPIs that are measuring, so how did we do on this policy? A lot of the time, the policies don't get operationalized. And when they do, nobody knows whose work it is to do anything. And so for that reason, like, we have a fantastic national gender policy, but I don't know how much it is operationalized. I have looked at it, I have engaged with it, I have found ways to make it work in my own little corner. But you can't see clear indices that says, okay, so as at January 2022, a year after this policy, what else? What has happened? How can we track it? How much further are we along before the year 2026 when this policy is meant to be, I don't know, reviewed or something like that? So having that kind of mechanism, first as individuals, and then as a community, and then as a nation. We all need to know this so well that we are tracking it and we are communicating it, using our social media to amplify it and say, this happened, we have moved the needle from point A to B. Tomorrow we want to move it to C. The day after we want to move it to M, and then Z, and keep going like that, until individually we can take our own responsibility on making this change happen. And communicating is for those young people who are coming in and reading about them, like, yes, at least I now know that a few years ago, this is where we were, and this is where we aim to be as a people in the coming years. That, for me, I think is the key thing towards operationalizing and implementing this, as we want to say.
Dr. Ene, would love to hear from you.
Thank you very much. I think we are having this conversation just about the time for 16 days of activism. And We need to be able to look at the issue of gender-based violence very seriously. This is a serious issue. You don't want to be in the data. You know, when it happens to your people, to your children, to your daughters, then it won't be in the data. The other time, about 300, more than Chibok girls, for example, there are still some of them in captivity. Some of their parents have died because they couldn't take it anymore. And then we have Leah Shuaibu still there. Can you see the kind of psychosocial effect that has on many families? So many children have been born out of that. And the children are Nigerians. And they are going to live and work with our children. What it is to be a woman. I'm a mother I have boys and girls. When I join my ancestors, I want to have children. My children will then be the women. And they will grow up to be old women and the grandmothers of this land. Where will be the room for them? If we don't invest in the human capital, if we don't invest in the culture, if we don't invest in the protection of both boys and girls especially because they are more affected, because they are the ones that get pregnant. What is the future? What does this future hold? So what I seek, what we seek, and we have worked with so many women. When I was country director of ActionAid, we worked with we had the opportunity to work with almost 200 women-led organizations to make sure. You have invited us. You invited us on elections. You were so concerned about issues of election. Who do we elect? How can we build a synergy around the women that want to run so that we can find them? So we need a new strategy because we have serious businesses to discuss on development. You can't develop without the issues of equality. The issue is that we are not equal. We are not in a competition. You need to identify the development challenges and be able to map out for what will lead to the equality. You know, and so we need to be able to care for the society. And what we have bad governance and we cannot have discussions. We have bad elections. We are not having discussions. Women are not on the table, whether at the state or any level. And they are dying on the maternity death road. When people are begging even women in other climes to have children, Nigerian women are pouring the children out and you cannot protect them. And a country who cannot protect, what we're having right now is a failure of governance. And that is what is leading to lack of women representation because there are lots of bad things going on they don't want women to be part of. Women are human beings. Women are part of the constituency and they have to be able to exemplify. But like I said, the political parties don't have register. INEC has complained so many times. Women need to go to political parties. You need to even become members of political parties. Identify the ones that will be able to protect women and girls. And, you know, they have it in their paper. We need to engage with their manifesto and take it to that level. But thank you for having me.
Fantastic. It has truly been an insightful and just enlightening session. We would like to say a big thank you to our guest, Adora Onyechere Sydney Jack, Dr. Ene Obi, and Jemima Jetel for their incredible insights. To our live audience, you've been amazing. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on social media to share your thoughts on this episode using the hashtag on your screen. I'm your host, Abosede Jojogan. Until next week, women's leadership can change everything everywhere. Bye for now.